Maplewood was a charming little village where everyone knew everyone else, and the sense of community was strong. The village was filled with quaint houses, cobblestone streets, and friendly faces. In this peaceful setting lived a young girl named Emma, who had a knack for solving puzzles and mysteries. Her keen observation skills and inquisitive mind had earned her the nickname Detective Emma among her friends and family. One sunny afternoon, as Emma was reading a mystery novel in her cozy attic room, she heard a commotion outside. She peeked through the window and saw a crowd gathering at Mrs. Green's house. Curious, she rushed downstairs and joined the crowd. Mrs. Green was an elderly woman who was beloved by everyone in the village. She was known for her kindness, her delicious apple pies, and her beautiful jewelry collection. Today, however, Mrs. Green looked distressed. Emma pushed through the crowd and approached Mrs. Green. "What happened, Mrs. Green?" she asked gently. "Oh, Emma, it's terrible," Mrs. Green exclaimed, her voice trembling. "My favorite necklace is missing. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. I always keep it in a special box, but this morning it was gone." Emma's eyes widened. This was a real mystery, and she was determined to solve it. "Don't worry, Mrs. Green," she said confidently. "I'll help you find your necklace." Mrs. Green managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Emma. I knew I could count on you." Chapter 1: The investigation begins. Emma decided to start her investigation at Mrs. Green's house. She knew that the first step in solving any mystery was to gather as much information as possible. She asked Mrs. Green to show her the place where she kept the necklace. Mrs. Green led Emma to her bedroom and opened a small, ornate jewelry box on her dresser. "This is where I always keep it," she explained. "I checked this morning, and it was gone. I haven't moved it or taken it out in weeks." Emma examined the jewelry box carefully. There were no signs of forced entry, and the box didn't look disturbed. She then looked around the room, checking for anything out of place. "Did anyone visit you recently, Mrs. Green?" Emma asked. "Yes, I had a few visitors over the past week," Mrs. Green replied. "My friend, Mrs. Thompson, came by for tea. The mailman delivered a package, and young Tommy from next door came to help me with some gardening." Emma made a mental note of the visitors. She needed to speak with each of them to see if they had noticed anything unusual. "All right, Mrs. Green," Emma said. "I'm going to talk to your visitors and see if they can provide any clues. I'll also check around the house and garden to see if I can find any signs of the necklace." Mrs. Green nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know what I'd do without you." Chapter 2: Gathering Clues. Emma decided to visit Mrs. Thompson first. She lived just a few houses away, and Emma knew she would be more than willing to help. Mrs. Thompson was a cheerful woman in her 60s, with a warm smile and a love for knitting. "Hello, Emma. What brings you here?" Mrs. Thompson greeted her. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson. I'm investigating the missing necklace from Mrs. Green's house. I was wondering if you noticed anything unusual when you visited her," Emma explained. Mrs. Thompson's smile faded. "Oh dear, I heard about the missing necklace. It's such a shame. I didn't notice anything strange, but I did see Tommy playing in the garden when I left. He seemed to be in a hurry." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That's helpful," Emma said. Next, Emma visited the mailman, Mr. Johnson. He was a friendly man who had been delivering mail in Maplewood for years. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson," Emma greeted him. "I'm looking into Mrs. Green's missing necklace. Did you notice anything unusual when you delivered a package to her recently?" Mr. Johnson scratched his head. "Now that you mention it, I did see someone loitering around her house that day. I couldn't get a good look, but they were wearing a dark hoodie." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That's very useful," Emma said. Finally, Emma went to see Tommy. He was a mischievous boy of 12 who loved playing pranks but had a good heart. Emma found him in his backyard, playing with his dog. "Hi, Tommy. Can I ask you something?" Emma began. "Sure, Emma. What's up?" Tommy replied. "I'm trying to find Mrs. Green's missing necklace. Mrs. Thompson said she saw you in Mrs. Green's garden the other day. Did you notice anything unusual?" Tommy looked nervous. "Well, I did see someone in a dark hoodie near the garden. They ran away when they saw me, but I didn't think much of it." Emma's mind raced. 2 people had seen someone in a dark hoodie near Mrs. Green's house. This was a significant clue. She needed to find out who this person was. Chapter 3: The Breakthrough. Emma spent the next day piecing together the clues. She knew that the person in the dark hoodie was the key to solving the mystery. But who could it be? As she pondered, she remembered something. There was a new family in town who had recently moved into the house at the end of the street. They had a teenage son named Jake, who often wore a dark hoodie. Emma decided to pay them a visit. She knocked on the door, and Jake's mother answered. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson. I'm Emma, from down the street. I'm investigating a missing necklace, and I was wondering if I could speak with Jake." "Of course, Emma. Jake is in his room." "I'll call him," Mrs. Wilson replied. Jake came to the door, looking puzzled. "Hi, Jake. I'm trying to find Mrs. Green's missing necklace. Several people saw someone in a dark hoodie near her house, and I know you often wear one. Can you tell me if you were there?" Jake's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, I was near Mrs. Green's house, but I didn't take the necklace. I saw someone else running away, and I chased after them. They dropped something in the bushes near the park." Emma felt a surge of excitement. "Can you show me where they dropped it?" Jake nodded, and they hurried to the park. Near the bushes, they found a small, velvet pouch. Emma carefully opened it and gasped. Inside was Mrs. Green's missing necklace. Chapter 4: The Culprit Revealed. Emma and Jake quickly returned to Mrs. Green's house to share the good news. Mrs. Green was overjoyed to see her precious necklace again. "Oh, thank you, Emma. You've done it," Mrs. Green exclaimed, hugging Emma tightly. But who took it? Mrs. Green asked, still bewildered. Emma turned to Jake. Can you describe the person you saw? Jake nodded. They were about my height, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. I couldn't see their face clearly, but they had a scar on their left hand. Emma's mind raced. She knew someone in the village who fit that description, Mark, a teenager who had a reputation for causing trouble. He often wore a dark hoodie and had a noticeable scar on his left hand from an accident a few years ago. Emma decided to confront Mark. She found him at the local convenience store, hanging out with his friends. Mark, I need to talk to you, Emma said firmly. Mark looked surprised but followed Emma outside. What's up, Emma? I know you took Mrs. Green's necklace. Jake saw you near her house, and we found the necklace in the bushes where you dropped it, Emma said, her voice steady. Mark's face turned pale. I didn't mean to take it. I was just looking around, and I saw the necklace. I didn't think anyone would notice. But when I saw Jake, I panicked and ran. Emma looked at him sternly. You need to apologize to Mrs. Green and return the necklace. What you did was wrong, but you can make it right. Mark nodded, ashamed. I will, Emma. I'm sorry. Chapter 5, Making Amends. Mark followed Emma to Mrs. Green's house, where he apologized profusely for his actions. Mrs. Green, although upset, forgave him, appreciating his honesty and willingness to make amends. I'm glad you returned it, Mark. But remember, it's important to respect others' property. I hope you've learned a valuable lesson, Mrs. Green said kindly. Mark nodded. I have, Mrs. Green. I'm really sorry. Emma felt a sense of accomplishment. She had solved the mystery and helped Mark understand the importance of doing the right thing. The village of Maplewood could return to its peaceful, harmonious way of life. Epilogue. A village united word of Emma's detective skills spread throughout the village, and everyone admired her determination and kindness. Emma continued to help others with her sharp mind and keen observation skills, solving puzzles and bringing people together. The village of Maplewood thrived, united by the bonds of community and friendship. And Emma, the young detective, became a symbol of hope and justice, inspiring others to always do their best and help those in need. Emma's story was a testament to the power of compassion, perseverance, and the belief that even the smallest actions could make a big difference. She had shown that by working together and looking out for one another, anything was possible. And so, the mystery of the missing necklace became a cherished tale in Maplewood, reminding everyone that kindness and honesty always prevail, and that true adventure lies in helping others and making the world a better place.